Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. This is Wendy. Today we're going to be doing 3 Dollar Tree DIYs for our spring farmhouse decor. For our first project, we'll be using one of these silver round party platters, a plastic placemat, one of the large stove covers, about 2 of the greenery bouquet stems, 1 cotton bud from the cotton stem, some burlap ribbon, which I had actually run out of, but you could use the kind with the lace in the middle, or I already had this bow made from a previous project, so I'm going to be using that. Some jute twine, and this is the kind from Walmart. It's a little thicker, but I'm going to actually end up using the kind from Dollar Tree that's a little thinner. Your glue gun, scissors, wire cutters, and a chenille stem if you're going to be making your bow, but mine's already made, so I'll just be using it for the hanger on the back of the plastic platter. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint over it with my Waverly white chalk paint, and it took about 2 coats and then maybe a little touch up towards the end, but I just got a full coverage and I want it pretty white and solid. And I feel like the more I paint projects, I'm getting a little bit better, and using a good brush is pretty much key. So while my platter was drying, I cut out the little wreath from the placemat, and I gave it about a 2-inch overlap because I want this to hang off of the cover so that I can tuck my greenery in behind it. So just using hot glue, I placed my placemat on top of the stove cover, and I ran out of glue, and it's always a good idea to take a little dot of glue to put at the end of your glue stick so that it doesn't fall out. So then I started cutting apart my greenery bouquets, and as I laid them out, I had intended only to use the green portions and none of the colored berries and sprigs, but I decided in the end to go ahead and add that color because I thought it looked better. And at the tops of both sides, I'm only going to go up about 3/4 of the way, and so I wanted to end both sides with one of the little ferns to kind of give it a finished look. And then once I had my basic layout ready, I started gluing down my pieces. And all I did for this was just overlapped the little sprigs over on top of each other, and then added in some of the little berries so that they were dispersed kind of evenly. And then I'm going to go down in the same direction on both sides and meet in the middle, but not completely, because then we're going to put our bow in between the 2 sides. And then I took one of the cotton buds and put that directly in the middle of the burlap bow. And then using my chenille stem, I just folded it over to make a little hanger and hot glued that on the back. You don't want to use a whole lot of hot glue on this because it will melt the plastic. So just a little bit will keep it, and then just make sure it's dry before you hang it. So then I took a little scrap piece of burlap to place under the placemat in the front, and then hot glued that around the top. So back around on the front side, I made one of those jute twine flowers by wrapping it around your fingers and then tying it in the middle. And you could leave it like that, but as I was making it, I thought I can get a little more Jesus in here. So I went ahead and made a cross out of the jute twine and just used the flower, straightened it out so that it would be like the crossbar of the cross, and then made a longer one with the jute twine and put that down first so that it looked like a cross at the top. And here's how it turned out. I love the way this looks. It's bringing in the spring colors, and I love the white. If you don't want to use just solid white, you could give it a galvanized metal look and give it that paint treatment, or you could distress it, whatever floats your boat. But I thought this was perfect, and I wanted to do a project that you guys could do even if you don't have a cameo or some kind of cutter. But I love this font on the placemat, and I think it turned out super cute. For our next project, we're going to be using 3 of these wooden crosses, a galvanized tin flower bucket, a gray and white buffalo check fleece baby blanket, some nautical rope, some jute twine, 3 nails, some moss, a grapevine napkin ring, and I used this before, that's why it's spray painted, but we're going to be covering that. A sprig of this greenery, it's called Blooming Branches. And then our glue gun, scissors, and wire cutters. And the first thing we're going to do is cover our galvanized tin bucket. And so I got a straight edge by cutting along the lines of one of the rows of buffalo check. And then I just measured the width of the pail so that I could cut out a strip to cover it. And I did that by using hot glue and just went all the way around on the top and on the bottom. And then at the back is where I'm going to place those together. And because it's fleece, it doesn't need like a finished edge. It just kind of goes together automatically. And it also has some give, so even though the pail is kind of tapered and larger towards the top than on the bottom, you can kind of just pull it and get it to where it's covered and tight on the top and the bottom. And then I just cut off the excess that went over the edge because I had stretched it to make it tight. So then I took my nautical rope and hot glued that, and I started at the back where the seam of the buffalo check blanket was, and then hot glued that all the way around. I'm actually going to be using this upside down, so even though I'm gluing this to the bottom of the bucket, that's actually going to be the top of our stand. And then to cut through the rope, you can just stick your scissors in between the strands and cut one and then cut two just to make it easier. And I have really good scissors, but even they won't cut through all three at the same time. So then I'm just going to use my hot glue to meet those two edges together and cut off the excess. So now I'm going to take my little crosses, and I like them the way they are and they're cute as is, but I'm going to do something different with it. So I took my spatula and pulled off the grace, and the grace went flying. It was grace like rain. So I did that on all three. And then I took some of my Waverly white chalk paint and added a little bit of elephant to it to make it a light gray. And then I'm gonna do the outside edges and kind of the same effect that they did the way it came, but I just didn't like how harsh the lines were. So I'm gonna do it just a little more rustic looking and maybe more distressed, I guess. So I just did that all the way around on all three of them. And then I wanted to raise the front cross, so I just took a couple of craft sticks and stacked them on top of each other and hot glued those down. And then I started to put the moss down first, but remembered I wanted to cover the bases of the crosses, so I hot glued one to the top of the craft sticks and then two behind it, kind of at a diagonal so that they were facing forward, and then just filled in the rest with the moss. So now for the two back crosses, I'm going to take my jute twine and wrap it around about 5 or 6 times, and then take another piece and tie that in the middle. And then I'll do that again with another set and then put those two together to make a little jute twine flower. And I'm going to do that 2 times and put those on the back 2 crosses with hot glue. So now I'm going to use my greenery, and I'm just going to pull off the branches that are attached, and then I pulled off the little buds that are on there as well, and I'm just going to use the stickery looking parts where it looks like thorns to me. And then I took my grapevine napkin ring and just pulled it apart so that I had a smaller version. And then I took my paddle wire and started wrapping those thorns around the napkin ring and just kept wrapping as I went. And then once I got it all put together, I went back in with my gray paint and just painted here and there just to get rid of the white and make it look worn out and weathered. And now I'm going to take my nails and slide them through the grapevine into the napkin ring. And then I'm going to take the grace that was on one of the crosses in the beginning that we took off and hot glue that over the crown of thorns. So then I took a scrap piece of this white sheer material that I had on hand, and it was real wrinkly, but I had used my straight iron to flatten it out, and then I went back in to kind of crinkle it back up so that it looked like it was folded and pleated, because I'm going to wrap that around the cross in the front. So to do that, I took some jute twine and measured about where it was going to land on the back of the cross and tied those up so that they would be gathered. And then I took my hot glue and placed a dot in that area and then stuck it to the back of the cross. And then once the sides were down, I took some more hot glue and pushed the front of the drape over that glue and pushed it down so it looked like it was gathered and draping. Then I went in with my black paint pen and I wrote INRI, which is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And then I put 2 little dots on each side so it would look like it was nailed to the top of the cross. And then I took my crown of thorns and hot glued that to the front of the base, and it was done. And I love when viewers give me tips and tricks, and I had a couple of them tell me to use hairspray in order to keep the moss from getting all over the place and shedding everywhere. So it totally works. So if you need to keep your moss in check, definitely use some hairspray. And so here it is all done. I think it turned out so cute and very farmhouse, but as we're getting ready to enter into Lent, I think this is the perfect piece of decor to celebrate the season. For our final project, we're going to be using one of these hanging wire baskets, a metal pie pan, a container. This is a plastic or acrylic container, and we're just going to be using the lid, and then a candle holder, one of these little glitter birds. They come in a pack of 2, and I had this one left over from Valentine's Day. And then this is the lavender that they have at Dollar Tree, but I just didn't have enough. So I happen to have this, which is a little softer and prettier from Walmart. And then some black elephant and white chalk paint. And then our glue gun, scissors, some E6000 and wire cutters. And actually I just got some new Gorilla Glue that's the same thing as E6000. So I'm going to try that out for the first time. So the first thing we're going to do is get our items ready to be painted. So I first took the chains off of the hanging basket, and then we'll be painting the basket, the pie plate or the pie tin, and then the lid of the acrylic canister. So I just dumped some white Waverly chalk paint into the pan and then just moved that around. We don't need a complete coverage because I'm going to go back in with all of these items and add some light gray to it so that it kind of gives it a galvanized look, but not very dark. I'm looking for a real light rustic finish for this. But because each of these items had a completely different finish, I wanted to start out with a white base so that when I did my paint treatment, that they would all look pretty much the same. We're also going to be painting our little birdie, and I just used the white paint, and when you go over the glitter, it kind of just gives it a concrete look just because of the texture of it. So I took off his little wings and made him all completely white, and with the red it kind of would pop through even after you had painted it, so I went back in and just made sure that he was pure white. So now in order to make the light gray paint, I'm just going to add a little bit of the elephant to my white chalk paint. and then it wasn't exactly the shade that I wanted, so I went back in with some black and just added a tiny little bit, and then mixed that up with my craft stick. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water on the side because I didn't want anything solid. I wanted it to be kind of see-through and translucent so that it looked like a little bit of a galvanized look. So I just went through all of the different items with my paintbrush and just mixed it around until I got the look that I wanted. If I got too much paint on there, I would just take a paper towel and kind of blotch it off and pull some of that off. And then again, if your paint gets a little too thick, you can just add a little teeny bit of water and mix it around, and then you get more of a smooth finish as opposed to real blotchy. Now I'm going to take my basket and I'm using pliers to take the hooks where the chain would have hung from, and I'm going to pull those down, and when you do, it'll kind of snap and lose a weld, and it still stays on there and it's still held on by the other side, but that's what's going to keep our basket from going over the pie pan. Then to get the top onto the basket, I just took that acrylic lid and went all the way around the edge of it with my Gorilla Glue. And I couldn't figure out how to do it just where it was going to hold on the crossbars, so I went ahead and just did it all the way around to save time. And then I'm going to flip it over, and then using my hot glue gun, I'm going to add big dollops of glue over the wire so that it adheres to the lid. Then I'm going to make a nest, and I took a plastic lid and put some hot glue on it, and then took some Excelsior. You could use moss from Dollar Tree. This is just what I had on hand. And I attached that and made it kind of circular into the shape of a nest, and then just pushed it down and covered the outside rim with more hot glue. And then I'll set that aside. Now I'm going to take my lavender and just cut those off. And I forgot to tell you, these were 97 cents at Walmart. And I'm just going to overlap them and hot glue along the way. And I want some of it peeking out of the cage part or the basket, so I want it to overlap the edges a little bit but still be able to put the lid with the hooks underneath so that it stays on top of the pie tin. So I just went around with my hot glue, and then I'm going to place my nest in between all of that, and it wasn't quite tall enough, so I used a spool, an empty spool, ribbon spool, and put that down, and then put my nest on top of that. I want to use this again for different seasons and maybe change out what's inside. So I didn't hot glue the ribbon spool or the nest to the tin so that I can take that out and change it if I want to. So now that the bird was completely dry and completely white, I reattached his wings to him using hot glue. And then the parts where I could see some hot glue under the lid, I decided to cover with some jute twine just so you couldn't see it. It wasn't that noticeable, but if you have it on a coffee table or something and it's at eye level, you probably would be able to see it. So I just took my jute twine and wrapped it around a few times and then hot glued it underneath. And then I'm going to take our pretty little bird and put him in his home, and then taking some Gorilla Glue, I'm going to go all the way around the rim of the candle holder for a permanent and really stable hold. And then I'll just use some hot glue to have an immediate hold. And then just take the whole pie plate and stick it right in the middle and make sure that it's centered by checking all the way around. And then I took another piece of jute twine to kind of go with the top portion and wrapped it around the bottom and just tied it in a sweet little bow. And here it is all done. I absolutely am in love with this. It turned out better than I even had in my brain. So I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would love if you would give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, I would appreciate if you hit that big red subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. So I hope everybody has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye.